When I saw this huge pack of colorful fine liners, I could not resist picking them up. They're just so colorful, and I've always been telling myself to use more colors in my line art. But then I thought, what if I created an illustration with fine liners only? But first, my favorite part of any new art supplies, swatching them and making a beautiful color chart. So let's see what these guys can do. And for something a little different this time, I thought it would be interesting to play around with the color of the paper. So I got some white, brown, and black paper. Let's see how that black does. Okay, confession, I for some reason thought these were going to have more of a gel pen consistency, so unfortunately I'm going to have to retire the black paper, which only makes me more excited to order a huge pack of gel pens and create an illustration, but for now, let's continue swatching. Obviously the white paper works a lot better for these pens, but I do think the brown paper has its own earthy charm to it. Obviously the colors are brighter and pop off of the white page, but I kind of like the look of this. They're dull, I don't know how to explain it, but I kind of like the brown paper even though it doesn't work as well as the white, so I think I'm probably going to stick with the white paper, but I think it would be fun to play around with our brown paper. I didn't want to give up on the brown paper just yet, so I thought it would be really cool to do a side-by-side comparison of the same exact illustration, both on the white and the brown paper. I mean, to be completely honest, there's really not that much we're going to learn from this experiment considering we did swatch the colors, but I feel like you don't really get a good grasp on what you're going to get into with an art supply just from the swatches. Sometimes your palette can really change things, sometimes your techniques or just shapes and just the way things look, the vibe can really change. Who knows? Spoiler alert, no, it was really just the same as the swatches, to be honest. It was just basically a dull version of the illustration on the white paper. I think if you were to use these pens on the brown paper for something like scrapbooking or journaling or just literally any other craft, making notes, letters, something cute, or maybe if you have a darker illustration style, I think that would work just fine. But for my style of art, I think maybe the brown paper was just too dull, which is kind of crazy because you guys know how much I love my earthy tones. I think it's one of those things where these pens were just so bright and colorful that I wanted to embrace those colors and the vibrancy of the material. Similar to how Posca pens have such bold, bright, limited colors, so I do like to embrace that when I draw with them. But when I work with, say, watercolors, I do tend to go towards more earthy tones. Why? I have no idea, but it is just so interesting to see how materials can really change your art style and your tendencies to work with color. For example, going into this illustration, I already really wanted to exaggerate Hatch's body and his circular head and stuff a lot differently, and exaggerate where things are bigger compared to where things are smaller. If you don't know who Hatch is my original character. It's this blue bunny lemur stuffed animal creature. I tend to draw him a lot when it comes to testing things out so I can get familiar with different art supplies. So far comparing our two different illustrations, one on the white paper and one on the brown paper, I don't hate the brown paper version, it's just next to the white paper version with how bright and colorful everything is. It's just It's hard to pick the brown paper version, but hey, it was really fun to compare two different illustrations with the same exact material, but seeing how maybe the paper you're using can affect your illustration. It's probably a bit of an exaggerated example to use a completely different color like brown versus white, but hey, it's interesting to see the differences. I also thought it was funny by just recreating an illustration how differently each one turned out. To be honest, it's pretty dang close. There isn't much of a difference between the two. Well, it seems like almost everything got larger and wider on the brown paper version, whereas the white paper version is more what I was going for. Maybe something about not being able to see the pencil as well made me draw differently, or maybe I'm not a computer, so I can't draw the same exact thing twice exactly the same. It also didn't take me too long when working with these pens to realize just how small the tips were and just how much of a mistake maybe this was. Don't get me wrong, I had a lot of fun working with these pens. I love the colors, they drew really well. It's just the tip size, super tiny. So already I knew that I had chose the right size of paper, 5x7. I even thought, should I work smaller next time? But also, super not going to do a fully illustrated background because it was a pain enough to do a character with this tiny little point. I think my mind would go crazy if I wanted to fill this whole page in with color, though the smaller details would probably fit a lot better with these pens because the tip is so small. Either way, it's been a while since I've done a poll. Here's a poll in the corner of the video. Do you like the brown paper version more, or do you like the white paper version more? And you know what? Also leave me a comment because I'm definitely going to forget I even put a poll on this video. I'm curious to hear about your opinions on the brown versus white paper. Which do you like more and why? Do you hate bright colors? Let's hear it. So in conclusion, like I said, there is a certain charm to the brown paper, but overall the effects are just way more bright and colorful on the white paper. And this is the brown paper. Let's get a few more doodles in with our white paper and see what we can create with these liners. Next up, if you can't tell by now, we are going to be drawing a dog. And I can already hear the comments. Yes, I draw a lot of dogs for someone who is a cat person. I just find dogs to be a lot more fun to exaggerate just because I feel like they have more shapes and more variety when it comes to dogs. They have snouts and tails, unlike cats. So I know I said I wasn't going to attempt any illustrations with a background because of how tedious I guess it was to fill in colors with these tiny pens. I don't really consider this illustration a illustration with a background just because it is very simple and got that spotlight effect to it. But I did want to play around with an illustration that did have more color and wasn't just a character on a white background. Instead, we have a character on a blue background. I do really feel like these pens are so bold and colorful that they are well suited for something like character designs or portraits or simple characters on a white background illustration. I think this doodle especially is the most successful out of the ones I make for this video. I absolutely love the effects, the colors, the way it turned out, to the shapes. Maybe I just got lucky, I don't know, but I really love this doodle. The colors are just so bright and bold and fun to play around with these pens. I love limiting my color palette. It is something I love to do because it really helps you exaggerate shadows and experiment with color, especially. Using that dark orange to shade something like a bright light yellow is so intense, but it's so satisfying. It's just so colorful. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, lining my illustrations with a colored line art instead of black is something that I've always wanted to push myself to do, but I always either forget or I'm too scared. I always want to use colored pencils to line my watercolor illustrations, but I always forget. So even though this illustration is already bright and different than my usual, I was able to use a different color to line the illustrations. Yes, there was a black pen, but just like the Posca pens, I didn't feel like using black to line my art. I felt like using red to line orange or purple to line blue really made these illustrations so much more bright and colorful and lively, and I just absolutely love that. It kind of looks like I used black for the dog's nose and eyes, but I didn't. I actually used the brown, which is really similar to black, but it adds a little bit of red color to this illustration instead of using the black. And for the birds in the background, I used the dark blue. So it's really small details like this that I think add to a colorful illustration, and I just love experimenting with things like that. Am I ever going to go through a phase where I exclusively use these pens to make illustrations? With the amount of time it took to color these in, probably not, but it's really fun just to experiment and see maybe what parts of these illustrations I want to continue incorporating into my other illustrations, like with watercolor. Also, I had to draw something with grass because they gave us so many greens in this pack. Blue and green is probably my favorite color, and they gave us 6 shades of blue and 6 shades of green, and they are all beautiful and I love them. Anyways, there is our doggy doodle. For our final doodle, I wanted to see how these pens worked when creating a human character. There was only one lighter skin color, and I was really curious about how well that would translate into an illustration. I still haven't quite figured out how to create human characters, especially with lighter skin, when working with brighter, more abstract colors, so this was definitely an experiment. As for who I am drawing, after I created that Kasey human version in the #TuneMe video, I have been wanting to draw her more and more, so this is a Kasey illustration. If you don't know who Kasey is, that's so sad. So this is definitely the least colorful doodle in this video. I think it was just a combination of going with the normal skin color and hair color, and then also her outfit is brown. So there's just not a lot of bright colors happening, but I still kind of like the way it turned out. It's really silly and bold, and I like it. So the main thing you can see here is I definitely wanted to play around with the texture of her fur coat. Yes, that is a fur coat, even though it just looks like her pubes are wrapped around her entire body. It's kind of hilarious to even think that. So you know what? If you want to imagine her pubes wrapping around her entire body, then fine. It's her pubes wrapped around her entire body. But for the sake of monetization, I am going to say that is a fur coat because technically it is a fur coat. So I really wanted to play around with texture because if you couldn't tell through all these doodles, when I fill in a block of color with these pens, you can definitely see almost every stroke. I tried a couple of techniques when filling in blocks of color with these fine liners, like doing one stroke or lots of little strokes, but it doesn't matter what I did, you could always see the strokes, which I'm not mad about. They are just fine liners and not meant to be filling in large spaces with. I think it does add a cute texture to these little doodles, and sometimes it's nice to see that you used a different material. But for this illustration, I thought it would be really interesting to embrace that texture, so I just went crazy with all the little swirls for her jacket. And for a while, I did leave it with a lot of white space. I thought it was interesting that you could see the texture of the pen, but when I finished the illustration, I was looking at the coat texture, and I just thought it was a little empty, and I didn't like it. So I went back and filled in a lot of the the white areas with more scribbles for the coat. And there's still a lot of texture to be seen, so I really enjoy it. I needed to refine the texture a little bit, I think. So for the color for skin, I used the apricot. It's not the best, it's a little dark, though I did really enjoy shading with purple. So I'm not really sure if I would use these for a lot of human characters in the future. If I did, I would probably use some crazy colors like red and blue or green. Really go crazy with the color palette. And when it came to the background for this illustration, I really just wasn't sure what to do. So I played around with colorful shapes overlapping, and I think it looks really neat, though it's not the best background for a character. I think maybe I should have went with a bigger blue circle in the background and had a variety of smaller shapes around it. But that is what I ended up with for our Sock Kasey doodle, and that is it for our final Fineliner doodle. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed this Fineliner only challenge, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay golden. But before I go, you know I have to say thank you to my amazing patrons for all of their support. You guys are amazing, as usual. Do you want early access to my videos, secret sketches, and coloring pages? Check out the link to my Patreon in the description. Thank you guys so much for the support. Bye!